In the still, pre-dawn hours of December 26, 1980, at around 3 o'clock in the morning, RAF Woodbridge, a United States Air Force base near the dense Rendlesham Forest in Suffolk, England, was expecting a quiet evening, with most of the base personnel still in a holiday lull, enjoying their brief calm between Christmas and New Year's. The shift that night was supposed to be uneventful. Security personnel conducting routine patrols found themselves amidst the tranquility typical of the season. The festive spirit still lingered in the air, with decorations from Christmas celebrations visible all around the base. Conversations were subdued, and the usual bustle of military life was noticeably quieter. It was the kind of night where nothing much was expected to happen. A time for relaxed vigilance, and perhaps even a chance to reflect on the recent holiday. But this calm was abruptly interrupted when the guards noticed something unusual. Strange lights descended into the forest outside the east gates of RAF Woodbridge. These lights, vibrant and pulsating, stood out starkly against the serene backdrop of the night sky, moving in a way that suggests intelligence and purpose. At first glance, the lights triggered immediate concerns of a Soviet incursion or espionage activity, perhaps a clandestine aircraft or reconnaissance operation attempting to breach British airspace or gather intelligence on military installations. The light's behavior, moving erratically, emitting strange colors, and descending into the forest, defied conventional aircraft capabilities and operational patterns known to them. Could this be a new Soviet technology, an experimental craft, or something altogether more inexplicable? RAF Woodbridge in the 1980s was a vital component of NATO's defense posture in Europe, supporting air operations, security, intelligence gathering, and logistical functions critical to Cold War strategies. Given its strategic location near the eastern coast of England, its proximity to Europe's eastern frontiers provided a vantage point for monitoring Soviet military activities in airspace, contributing to NATO's overall intelligence network. John Burroughs, one of the guards that witnessed the strange lights, contacted Sergeant Jim Penniston and told him what he saw. Despite the holiday atmosphere and the expectation of a quiet night, their training and duty kicked in immediately. The base command quickly mobilized an investigative team. Penniston selected 3 military officers for this critical task. Master Sergeant Chandler, known for his composed demeanor, Airman First Class John Burroughs, recognized for his keen observation skills, and Airman Ed Cabinsag, a reliable and steady presence. The 4 men jumped in a jeep and headed towards the east gate. When they arrived, Sergeant Penniston approached the guards who were still posted at the apparent crash site, and he asked them what they had witnessed. One of the guards, Bud Steffens, responded saying, "It didn't crash. It landed." The men looked at each other puzzled, all fully aware that no conventional aircraft could have landed in such a dense forest. Penniston radioed the radio tower at RAF Bentwaters, a twin base located nearby, to see if anyone had caught anything on the radar scope. The radar operator confirmed that they did have an unknown object on their scope. However, it vanished from their screen when it flew over the Woodbridge area. They had carted it off and assumed it was an error because it was moving at such an incredible speed. Equipped with flashlights and radios, the trio, Penniston, Burroughs, and Chandler, prepared to venture into the dark, forbidden forest, leaving Cabinsag behind with the jeep in case they needed backup. As they approached the edge of the forest, the lights grew more distinct, revealing patterns and colors that defied conventional explanations. The lights illuminated their breath, which was visible in the frosty December air. The air was thick with anticipation. and the usual silence of the post-Christmas shift was replaced by a palpable tension. The lights, strange and compelling, seemed to beckon them into the depths of the forest. As they advanced, radios began to malfunction, crackling as the intensity of the lights grew. Penniston, worried that they were now unable to contact the base, or Cabin-Sag, who was waiting for them back at the Jeep, ordered Chandler to return to the Jeep and inform Cabin-Sag of the situation with the radios. As Chandler made his way back to the Jeep, Penniston and Burroughs moved forward, cautiously but with determination, driven by both their duty to investigate and their curiosity about the unusual phenomenon unfolding before them. The air tingled with an unexplained energy. An eerie feeling like static electricity filled the air, each step bringing them closer to the source of the mysterious phenomenon. Their feet grew heavy as it was becoming increasingly more difficult for them to walk. The ground was frozen solid from the cold winter temperatures, but it felt like they were walking through waist-high water, or soup as they would later describe it. Shadows danced ominously around them, amplified by the shifting hues of the lights that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. The light was wading through the trees, seemingly evading the servicemen. All at once, the men could hear animals on a nearby farm screeching and hollering in a frenzy. All around them, the forest erupted with animals screaming, and their screams sounded like they were human. As the men continued trekking through the forest, suddenly, amidst the illuminated branches and dense underbrush, they came upon a clearing, and just as soon as they stepped through the brush, they were blinded by an explosion of light. The light was so bright it lit up the entire forest as if it were in the middle of the day. A few seconds later, after the intense light subsided, they opened their eyes and beheld a sight that defied all expectation. A triangular metallic craft glowing silently in the darkness, hovering slightly above the forest ground. Its surface, sleek and reflective, Penniston and Burroughs approached cautiously. Their hearts were pounding with fear. The animals, now silent. The static feeling was now intensified, raising the hair on their skin. Penniston stepped closer and dared to extend his hand and touch the object's smooth metallic surface. He felt a faint hum beneath his fingertips, a sensation that sent a chill down his spine, although the craft was warm to the touch. As he examined the strange craft, he noticed intricate symbols etched into its material that resembled Egyptian hieroglyphics. As he ran his fingers across the symbols, they felt rough like sandpaper. Burroughs, standing close by, shined his flashlight on the object, his mind racing to comprehend the enormity of what lay before them. The forest seemed to hold its breath as the men stood transfixed, their training and instincts at odds with the inexplicable scene unfolding in front of them. Penniston continued to run his hands across the symbols. He noticed a larger symbol, centered and more prominent than the others. He reached out and touched it, and when he did, the craft lit up again, blinding him once more. In that bright flash of light, he could see a sequence of ones and zeros in his mind's eye. After a few seconds, his vision immediately returned, and he took out his notepad and wrote down as many details as possible, including sketches of the craft and the symbols that were etched onto it. Minutes stretched into eternity as he studied the craft, documenting every detail with a mixture of awe and trepidation. Suddenly, the silence was shattered. The lights intensified, casting long, eerie shadows across the forest floor. Without warning, the craft began to rise, slowly, defying gravity with a graceful fluid motion. Penniston and Burroughs watched in disbelief as the object ascended through the trees over the course of a few minutes. The forest around them seemed to pulse with the aftershock of its departure. Leaves rustling and branches swayed as they stirred by an unseen force. The craft vanished into the vast expanse above, leaving the men standing and stunned in silence, their minds struggling to comprehend the extraordinary encounter. After witnessing the enigmatic craft ascend and disappear into the night sky, Sergeant Jim Penniston and Airman First Class John Burroughs made their way back to meet Cabansag and Chandler by the Jeep. Their minds reeling with the extraordinary events they had just experienced, they began to talk. In their conversation, Penniston made a comment to Burroughs that he estimated the encounter lasted a few minutes. Burroughs raised his brow, confused. For him, it had only lasted a few seconds. Their conversation was interrupted as they reached the end of the trail where the Jeep was parked, but no one was there. Cabansag and Chandler had seemingly left them behind. Penniston and Burroughs continued on foot until they reached the main road, where they found Cabansag and Chandler with 6 other military personnel in a state of panic. One of the military officers grabbed his radio and notified Woodbridge that Penniston and Burroughs were found safe and alive, and to call off the search party. Penniston and Burroughs were confused. To Penniston, only a few minutes had gone by, and to Burroughs, only a few seconds. To everybody else, it had been over 45 minutes. Penniston began to feel dizzy and uncomfortable. His vision blurred. The chatter from the surrounding officers became faint and muffled, and although he told no one at the time, he started having visions. Arriving back at the base, the 2 men were immediately debriefed by their commanding officers. Their accounts of encountering a strange, glowing object with inexplicable symbols were met with a mixture of curiosity and cautious skepticism. Penniston in particular was insistent on the details he observed: the metallic sheen of the craft, the hum beneath his fingertips, and the peculiar symbols that seemed to defy earthly comprehension.
Sergeant Jim Penniston. I estimated it to be about 3 meters tall and about 3 meters wide at the base. No landing gear was apparent, but it seemed like she was on fixed legs. I moved a little closer. I walked around the craft, and finally I walked right up to the craft. I noticed the fabric of the shell was more like a smooth, opaque black glass.
Burroughs, however, did not exactly corroborate his partner's account. He went on emphasizing the surreal nature of the encounter and the intense emotions stirred within him. But oddly, after the first blinding light subsided, Burroughs did not see the same black craft as Penniston. To him, it was just a light. He described it as an oval-shaped red light that resembled the sun. He said it only lasted a few seconds as Penniston approached the light, and a few seconds later, the object took off into the sky. The 2 men were then informed that they weren't the only ones that had an encounter with the enigmatic lights. 2 other soldiers had also seen the lights in the sky and pursued them in their jeep. Racing through the dark, winding paths of the forest, the soldiers kept their eyes fixed on the elusive orbs. Suddenly, without warning, a bright flash of light engulfed them, so intense it seemed to pierce through their very beings. The jeep's engine sputtered and died, leaving them stranded in the eerie silence of the forest. No matter what they tried, the engine just wouldn't start, as if some unseen force had rendered it useless. Stranded and unnerved, the soldiers realized that they were outside the safety of the base perimeter. They contacted the local police to report the extraordinary events unfolding around them, as they described the bizarre lights and the inexplicable failure of their vehicle. Shortly after 4 a.m., officers arrived on the scene, only to report back that the only lights visible were those of the Orford Ness Lighthouse, miles away on the coast. The beams of the lighthouse cut through the pre-dawn darkness, casting eerie shadows but offering no answers. As the first light of day broke in the morning of December 26th, the forest began to reveal its secrets. Servicemen returned to the small clearing near the eastern edge of the forest. What they found was perplexing. 3 small triangular-shaped impressions on the ground, arranged in a precise triangular pattern. Nearby trees bore the marks of something unusual, burns and broken branches that spoke to an event far from ordinary. Unable to sleep, Sergeant Penniston joined the crew and made plaster castings of the triangular-shaped impressions. Penniston wanted physical evidence of the incident, knowing his claims would face ridicule and scrutiny. By 10:30 a.m., the local police were summoned once again, this time to witness the strange impressions for themselves. The officers examined the site, considering whether these markings could have been made by an animal. Their assessment, however, did little to dispel the growing sense of mystery. By midday, the incident had become a running joke among the troops on the base, with many teasing Penniston and Burroughs about their supposed UFO encounter. When Lieutenant Colonel Charles Holt, the deputy base commander, checked in for duty, he quickly became aware of the joke circulating about the previous night's events. Determined to maintain a sense of professionalism and avoid the stigma associated with UFO sightings, Holt instructed his men to refer to the phenomenon as unexplained lights in their official reports. He understood the potential gravity of what had been seen, if it was indeed a real threat from the Soviets. The base commander, Ted Conrad, swiftly took action, classifying the various reports that had been made as top secret. It became clear that the higher-ups were taking the incident far more seriously than the base's troops. Surprisingly, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Holt, who would have typically been involved in such a process, found himself bypassed for reasons he couldn't comprehend. This unusual exclusion left Holt puzzled and hinted at the possibility that this incident was being handled at a level that was beyond his immediate authority. The following evening, on the night of December 27th, 1980, the base was hosting a delayed Christmas party on the on-base bar. Laughter echoed through the room, and jokes about little green men continued to be a popular topic. Amidst the festive atmosphere, an on-duty lieutenant named Bruce England burst through the doors of the bar, with his face etched with concern. He hurried over to Colonel Holt and urgently pulled him aside. With a tense whisper, he delivered a startling message. "It's the UFO. It's back." Determined to get to the bottom of this mystery himself, Holt took charge of a team tasked with investigating the mysterious occurrences in the Rendlesham Forest. He called on Sergeant Monroe Nevels and Master Sergeant Bobby Ball to join him in the investigation. As they prepared to head out, Holt ordered some of the other troops to set up a series of lights and aim them into the sky for better visibility. Strangely, every light was either out of fuel or had mysteriously malfunctioned, adding yet another layer of eerie intrigue to the unfolding events. Armed with an array of specialized equipment, including radiation detectors, cameras, and a tape recorder, the men set out into the darkened woods under the cover of the night sky. Holt, keenly aware of the significance of this moment, recorded their observations and reactions on a microcassette recorder, later known as the Halt tape. The forest, still and hauntingly quiet, seemed to hold its breath as Halt and his team investigated through the dense underbrush. Their footsteps echoed softly in the silence, punctuated by the occasional crackle of twigs underfoot. As they proceeded deeper into the heart of the forest, the radiation equipment they carried crackled with activity as they approached the landing site from the previous night, indicating higher than normal levels of radiation in certain areas.
Yes, now I'm getting some residual. I can read down. The meter's definitely giving a little pulse. Okay, why don't we do this? Why don't we make a sweep? Here, I've got my gloves on now. Let's make a sweep out around the whole area, about 10 foot out, and make a perimeter run around it.
The trees surrounding the area were scorched, and pieces of bark were torn off, as if something had twisted its way through.
We found a small blast, what looks like a blasted or scruffed up area here. We're getting very positive readings. Yeah.
One of these trees that face into the blast, what we assume is a landing site, all have an abrasion facing in the same direction towards the center.
There's a round abrasion on the tree about 3.5, 4 inches in diameter. The indentations look like something twisted as it got, as it sat down on them. Looks like someone took something and sat it down and twisted it from side to side. Very strange.
The men used a thermal imaging device and noticed the landing site was significantly warmer than the surrounding environment.
Getting a definite heat reflection off the tree, about 3 to 4 feet off the ground. 3 trees in the area, immediately adjacent to the site, within 10 feet of the suspected landing site. We're picking up heat reflection off the trees.
We are getting an indication of a heat source coming out of that center spot.
This is strange.
As the men were investigating the former landing site, around 2 a.m., they noticed the animals in the woods started screeching again, just like the night before.
We're hearing very strange sounds out of the farmers' barnyard animals. They're just very, very active, making an awful lot of noise.
Suddenly, their attention was drawn to a dazzling sight in the sky. Flashing red light illuminated the canopy above, their intensity fluctuating in a mesmerizing display.
There it is. Hey, I see it too. What is it?
We don't know, sir.
So can I get some? Yeah, it's a strange, small red light. And all the barnyard animals have gotten quiet now. There's no doubt about it. There's some kind of strange flash of red light ahead. Weird. There's something very, very strange.
And it just moved to the right.
Yeah.
Off to the right.
Strange.
Halt and his team watched in awe as the bright, pulsating light moved with purpose through the trees, casting a surreal glow over the surrounding landscape.
We're probably about 200 to 300 yards away. It looks like an eye winking at you, still moving from side to side.
Without warning, the light emitted a laser-like beam that seemed to probe the forest floor. The men shouted. They thought it might be scanning for something.
Okay, here he comes from the south. He's coming toward us now. Now we're observing what appears to be a beam coming down to the ground. This is unreal.
After a few minutes, the object began dripping something that looked like molten metal. Voices echoed through the darkness, exchanging theories and speculations in real time.
It's coming this way. It is definitely coming this way. Pieces of it are shooting off. There is no doubt about it. This is weird.
As the hours passed, the mysterious lights in the sky gradually faded, leaving the forest once again shrouded in darkness. The investigation, characterized by meticulous documentation, continued into the early morning hours. Though only 18 minutes of those recordings were ever made public, Halt claims he recorded up to 5 hours of observation that night. He remains skeptical that the rest of the tapes will ever be released to the public, for reasons that remain unclear. Following the events of December 26th through the 27th, Halt drafted an official memorandum addressed to the UK Ministry of Defence. In this memorandum, Halt meticulously outlined the sequence of events, describing the initial reports of the unusual lights descending into the forest, the deployment of investigative teams, and the discovery of physical evidence, such as indentations in the ground and elevated radiation levels. Halt's authoritative tone underscored the seriousness with which the military command regarded the incident. Colonel Charles Halt told the BBC that he had gained written statements from a number of radar operators who were working at RAF Bentwaters while he was stationed there. Speaking to the BBC Radio Suffolk, the former deputy commander said,
"I have confirmation that Bentwaters radar operators saw the object go across their 60-mile scope in 2 or 3 seconds, thousands of miles an hour. He came back across their scope again, stopped near the water tower. They watched it and observed it go into the forest where we were. At Wattisham, they picked up what they called a bogey and lost it near Rendlesham Forest. Whatever was there was clearly under intelligent control."
In the months following the incident, Burroughs, Penniston, and others began experiencing unexplainable health problems. Burroughs in particular suffered from deteriorating vision, throat issues, and a severe heart condition. The military stonewalled him, classifying all the documents as top secret, and even refusing to acknowledge his service in the military. Despite those obstacles, doctors diagnosed Burroughs with broadband, non-ionizing electromagnetic radiation exposure, likely caused by ultraviolet, infrared, or high-powered microwave energy. After a prolonged battle with the Air Force, Burroughs eventually received disability compensation, but his medical records remained classified, leaving unanswered questions about the true extent of what happened in the forest. In the coming months, Penniston too experienced health issues and continued to have the vivid visions of ones and zeros that started on that fateful night. Confused and overwhelmed, he started writing down what he saw in his mind's eye, and only after filling pages with cryptid sequences did the visions finally stop. When he finished writing down the sequence of ones and zeros, he tucked the notebook away, not giving it much thought for the next 20 years. Little did he know that those visions were actually a cryptic message. In 2010, during an interview, Penniston retrieved his old notebook to show the reporter the sketches of the hieroglyphic-like symbols that were etched onto the UFO from that night. As Penniston flipped through his notebook, the reporter was intrigued as he spotted the sequence of ones and zeros, and he asked Penniston about their significance. Penniston revealed that he believed the information had been downloaded into his mind from the UFO. Curious, the reporter suggested having the sequences analyzed, suspecting they might be binary code. Penniston agreed, allowing the reporter to take the notebook to a computer programmer, who meticulously analyzed the code. To both of their astonishment, it was revealed that the sequence of ones and zeros was actually a message from the future.
Exploration of humanity continuous. Continuous for planetary advance. Eyes of your eyes. Origin year 8100.
The rest of the message contained a list of coordinates for locations around the globe. Those coordinates included the Nassau lines in Peru, the Great Pyramid of Giza, the Temple of Apollo in Greece, Sedona, Arizona, Caracal, Brazil, and Mount Taijan in China. The final location on the list was labeled The Origin, situated underwater off the coast of Ireland. However, this spot wasn't always submerged underwater. Researchers unearthed that the coordinates could be linked to the mythical island of Hy-Brasil. Hy-Brasil is known as a phantom island, which is an island that used to appear on maps but no longer does. Hy-Brasil appeared on maps for centuries, including the famous Perry-Reese map from 1513, which even depicted Antarctica without ice. Some tales describe Hy-Brasil as the abode of Irish gods, while others say it was inhabited by priests or monks who possessed ancient knowledge, allowing them to create an advanced civilization. There's speculation that St. Brendan's famous quest for the Promised Land might have led him to Hy-Brasil. These stories could have been passed down from the end of the last ice age, when sea levels were lower. One of the most fantastical tales of Hy-Brasil comes from Captain John Nisbet, who claimed to have discovered a mysterious island in 1674 while traveling from France to Ireland. In his story, his ship encountered a dense fog and landed in shallow waters on a misty beach. As he explored the island, he encountered large black rabbits and a wise old wizard, who invited him into his castle. The wizard, as the story goes, revealed that he had cast a spell to make the island invisible to ordinary eyes, but the spell had been broken. The wizard gifted him gold and silver as he sent him on his way. A lesser-known but well-documented event in the Western world is the story of Utsuro Bune from around 1800 in Japan. According to the myth, an unidentified floating object washed up on a village shore. The villagers described the object as spherical and adorned with strange writing. A woman emerged from the capsule dressed in fine clothing and speaking an unknown language, making communications with the locals impossible. She was a pale, red-headed woman, alone inside the ship. What is particularly intriguing are the similarities between the glyphs on the Utsuro Bune craft and those of the Rendlesham Forest craft. Despite the 200-year gap between these two events, both sets of glyphs feature a triangle with two circles. Additionally, one depiction of the Utsuro Bune craft shows it as shiny and black, much like the Rendlesham Forest craft. The message said origin year 8100, but Hy-Brasil was submerged into the ocean hundreds of years ago. Penniston, reflecting on the message, doesn't believe that the Rendlesham Forest UFO was extraterrestrial at all. He theorizes it was a message from humans, only that these humans are from 6,000 years in the future. In the aftermath of the incident, key personnel involved steadfastly contributed to the growing body of evidence. They participated in numerous interviews and provided detailed statements over the years, each account adding layers of depth and context to the enduring mystery of the Rendlesham Forest incident. Their consistent testimonies, supported by documented evidence and official communications, bolstered the credibility of the events. Skeptics, on the other hand, proposed natural explanations to rationalize the events. For instance, misidentification of celestial objects, such as the bright star Sirius or other astronomical phenomena, could have contributed to the initial reports of unusual lights in the sky. Contrasting this perspective is the theory that suggests the incident may have been the result of a classified military experiment. Proponents of this view speculate that the craft observed could have been an experimental aircraft or drone, possibly incorporating advanced technology beyond the public domain at the time. Some speculate that the experiment was not with the craft, but on the men themselves. Many wonder if there was some sort of MK Ultra mind control experiment at play, or maybe the men were secretly drugged and hallucinating to test some new military psychological drug. Another plausible explanation put forward by skeptics involves the nearby Orford Ness Lighthouse, whose rotating beams could potentially mimic the appearance of UFO-like lights when viewed from a distance or through the dense foliage of the Rendlesham Forest. But through all the skepticism, believers argue that these were trained observers who would not have mistaken what they saw for a star or a lighthouse. They also emphasized that no military aircraft, even today, is capable of performing the maneuvers witnessed by those soldiers. The Rendlesham Forest incident, since its occurrence in December 1980, has captured the imagination of people worldwide and has become a focal point of extensive media coverage and scrutiny. So I ask you, what do you believe happened in the Rendlesham Forest on those 2 nights? Were extraterrestrial visitors visiting our planet? Were the men hallucinating during some government experiment? Did they see a military experimental craft? Or were these humans visiting from another time? Either way, stay vigilant, fellow truth seekers, because the truth is out there. End transmission.